Hi, in this video we are going to talk about one of the geological features of the Earth, which is a rift valley. Okay, so first let's look up the definition for a rift valley. So it is a large, elongated depression with steep walls formed by the downward displacement of a block of the Earth's surface between nearly parallel fault or fault systems. Right, quite technical, so let's look for a simpler explanation or a simpler definition. So it says it's a lowland region that forms where the Earth's tectonic plates move apart or rift. Okay, so the rifting means the moving apart of plates. So therefore, in the real world, we can see rift valleys via these pictures here. So this is a satellite image of one of the places in Africa. So we call this the African Rift or the East African Rift system. So we see here Great Lakes, right? So it's a lake, it's filled up with water. But if you think about it, why is it filled up with water? Because it's a low depression. It's a low part of the land. And therefore, when it rains, the water collects on the land and making that structure a lake. Okay? But I have here a much better view example of a rift valley, which is this one, right? So here you see elevated areas on each side, and then at the middle you see a flat land, and then you see cracks, right? So literally the ground is split into two. There's a crack in the ground, causing a lower depression at the middle, and then you have these structures at the sides because of the depression. Okay, so you can even see that in here. This is in Kenya, so you see the ground is really uh, the ground really has a crack in the middle, right? And why is this? Well, again, just from the definition, it's saying that it's because um, the tectonic plates move apart. Okay, so how does this work? Well, I have here an animation. Okay, and let's have two crusts, and then when they move apart, see a depression is formed at the middle, right? And if we are going to look at it slower, what really happens is this, where this is one plate, originally one plate, right? However, the sides of the plate move to different directions, okay? So what happens is if this part moves that way and this part moves that way, then obviously the plate will split into two. And when that happens, obviously the middle will develop a crack, and therefore the materials at the middle will have nothing to go but downwards, and therefore you form this depression at the middle, and you have this elevated structures at the sides. But it's not really elevated; it's just that the middle depresses because again, when the plates move, they develop a crack at the center, and therefore the materials at the center kind of depress downwards because it has nowhere to go. So if we are going to look at it at another illustration, so here you have, because of the forces that pushes this plate to this part of the plate to move this way and move that way, you form a crack in the ground, and that part of the ground depresses, and at first it forms a valley, right? Forms a valley, and again, when the rains collect, you form Great Lakes or inland seas, and then after that you form a small sea, and then eventually that sea develops, if the rifting continues, develops into an ocean. Okay, but however, there are some interesting things here, which is the fact that again, this all started as one plate. Okay, this all started as one plate, and then because of the rifting, that plate, because this part of the plate moves this way and this part of the plate moves that way, that plate splits into two. Okay, so at this point now you can say that your plate has become two plates. Okay, call it plate A dot 1 dot A and call this plate 1 dot B. So this is interesting because it means that you have one plate and then it breaks into two plates and then you develop a boundary at the center via that crack, and then that boundary is obviously a divergent boundary because meaning this second subplate that was developed moves they move in opposite directions, right? Now, again, what's interesting here is we often think of boundaries as being there first, and then we know if they're divergent. But the fact of the matter is, a plate could be diverging when opposite parts of it move in different direction, and then because of the divergence, it develops a boundary. So the boundary is not the thing that comes first. What happens first is a plate diverges into two, causing the development of a boundary between them, and therefore we have a divergent boundary. So that is how rift valleys are formed. Rift valleys are formed when you have a continental plate or a plate that contains a continental crust diverge into two, and therefore the middle, the crack that develops in the middle, depresses, and you form these rift valleys. And again, these rift valleys eventually would develop and become Great Lakes, or would become inland seas, and eventually it would develop and become oceans. Okay, so that is it about rift valleys.